And welcome to Dead Headspace. I am your host, Patrick R. McDonough. Get serious, Brendan. Joined always by my co-host, Brendan LaFaro. Say hi, Brendan.
Hello, everybody.
And today we're talking to a man that I have wanted on since before the show started. So it is long overdue. The author of Burner, as well as Blood Roses, along with many other glorious books, Bob Ford, or Robert Ford, because you go by both. So hello, Bob.
Thanks so much for having us, guys. Appreciate it.
Let's just dive into it, man. What got you into horror?
You know, I'm an only child, and I grew up in the middle of nowhere in Maryland on a farm. And, nobody was really close by. I didn't really have close friends to play with or, anything like that. So my parents kept feeding me a steady supply of books. And both of them were always into things like The Twilight Zone and Tales from the Crypt. And let's see, there was a series called Friday the 13th. You're probably too young for that one. Friday the 13th, it had nothing to do with the movie.
Oh, the show. Yeah, that was...
It was like this haunted antique shop.
That's
and
it,
down the antiques or the items and the thing. But in any show like that, I mean, they were glommed onto that stuff. And I just kind of grew up being around it. My grandmother used to tell ghost stories all the time from when she was a kid and talk about seances and whatever. So it just sort of seeped into my bones when I was a kid. And, I've just always been drawn to writing it and reading it and just, kind of like I say, it just grew up seeped into my bones.
I feel like you talked about that on Brian Keene's podcast. That was... I feel like it was you, man. It was years ago, but it was one of the earlier seasons. I didn't think I was going this direction, but if you are comfortable with it, let's talk about that. Was that your first podcast, being a guest on his show?
On Brian? Honestly, I have no idea anymore. I have no idea. It sounds like it could have been. That was kind of in the early days when people really jumping on, kickstarting podcasts and things. Mm-hmm. After that, I've lost. I mean, I don't want to be that guy, but I've lost count. I have no idea anymore. Especially when you're really hot and heavy and you're promoting a book. It's sometimes you get asked to be on a podcast. Sometimes I've reached out and asked other people or whatever. But yeah, I have no idea. I'm pretty sure Brian's probably was the first, though. I'll say that.
Okay. Brennan, I don't want to hog all the air, so you go, please.
And that's when you still had to drive to Brian's house to be part of the podcast. No Zoom, no Skype.
Exactly.
That's a cool atmosphere, though. We definitely get a little bit of that with the video. I remember when we started this out, like half first season is just audio and it's just not the same, but get a whole bunch of writers in one room and just talk about it. Like that sounds like a blast. And it's so cool that the episodes are up there for people who, were not privy to them when they were coming out brand new. People can still go back and check that out like a time capsule.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of really beneficial information. A lot of people I know put on podcasts, the audio only version podcast, and they'll throw it on the background while they're exercising or doing whatever. And there's still a lot of really beneficial information to be learned from people that you guys interviewed, back then. So no, it's awesome.
Thanks, man. Brendan, was there a follow-up to that?
No, it's just a statement.
Oh, okay. Well, going to Scares That Care, that was a totally different environment. Like I heard Brian talk about for like 2 or 3 years when I first started listening to his show, and it's so different because it's these people that you talk to. It wasn't my first experience, but like you talk to people on the internet and meet them. I don't even think Brennan used to do this, but when I was in my adolescence, I would play Counter-Strike online, and I met a bunch of fellow players. It's like terrorists versus counter-terrorists, first person shooter, and we would go to like LAN centers, just like a local place to play the game. And I was young, but my next door neighbor also played, and so does his older brother. So that's why my parents let me go with him. But it was really my first experience in that scenario was super weird because it's like we didn't see each other in video. So we just heard their voice, and hearing their voice and really seeing what they look like, because this is the early aughts. So the pictures, they weren't horrible, but they weren't great. And it was so bizarre. So going back to Scares That Care, that was being like in a world where everyone gets what you're doing and what you think, and they're right there with you.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And it really is important because writing is so freaking solitary, as it is. And to go to a convention like that, just being around like-minded people, and during the con, well, you've seen it during the actual convention day, it's crazy, it's hectic. You're selling books, you're meeting people, you're doing, it's nonstop. But when the day unwinds and the dealer's room and vendor's room closes, then you can kind of take a breath for a little bit and relax. And that's when you catch up with those people and who've been doing the same thing, hustling, all day long, same as you. But that's when that kindred spirit thing really kicks in. And you're able to talk about, things that you can't talk about. If you try to talk about half the shit that we talk about to your coworkers, they're going to be like, oh yeah, sure. Hey Joey, we got to call somebody to come down here. You can't talk about that kind of stuff. But it's there's nothing like it, and it really helps break things up. It gets your batteries recharged to get back to doing what you're doing when you go back to daily life all over again.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Plus, on top of all that, like you get to see people for kind of who they really are, and I don't mean that in any kind of bad way. It's just you don't necessarily, I'm not saying everyone should go with no walls up, but like you kind of can be yourself.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, to a degree.
So I want to jump in with something.
Yeah, to a degree. That's it's a good point.
So, I'm thinking what you said about writing being such a solitary thing and how you absolutely cannot just walk into work and start talking about, what your work in progress is about, especially, I'm thinking of Burner in my head right now. That would not go well. But, it's something that Patrick and I probably take for granted to a degree because we get to sit down once or twice a week with like-minded people and just like sit and talk about writing and about horror in general for an hour and a half. So with you feeling that solitary, atmosphere, I suppose, what do you do to recharge your battery between conventions?
Well, being online and being able to talk to some people online is really helpful. But, I've just honestly, the past couple of years, I have been keeping myself so damn busy that the solitary part of it hasn't really affected me too much. I've been kind of head down, in the laptop. But no, being online with social media and being able to privately chat with other writers, that's been really beneficial. And you can go, there's friends of mine, writer friends of mine that I can just vent for a while and they'll vent back. I'm like, okay, you good? Yep. You good? Yep. And then we go back to doing what we're doing. But in the past, I had a weird Facebook memory pop up for me the other day. I was going to repost it, but I'm like, nah, I'll just move on. In my former work life, I worked as a marketing director at a credit union. And I came down to the office kitchen one day and somebody had bought from the grocery store this really bizarre cake. And it had a icing sheep head and like feet that popped off the side of the cake. And I just tucked a napkin beneath it and wrote, "Are the lambs still screaming, Clarice?" And I got my coffee and left. It took about 40 minutes before somebody walked in and said, "Did you write that shit out there in the kitchen?" Yeah, I did. So, but you got to keep people on your toes a little bit. But no, the solitary thing, it is a real thing. And it used to be, when I started writing, the I'm going to show my damn age now, but I started writing my first novel when I was 19, and I was co-writing it with a lady in public relations that I knew. And I went to college. She was still in Maryland. We were mailing chapters back and forth to each other.
Wow.
I had an old Smith Corona word processor, so at least if I was editing, I didn't have to retype the damn thing all over again. It was this weird little word processor that I could go in and edit on screen, and I was ready to type. I basically just kept feeding it typewriter paper, and it would just type the damn thing out. It wasn't even a printer. It would just literally type it out on its own auto type. But yeah, there were, we would phone call once every week and a half when we would get a new chapter from each other. But it was, I much prefer today, where you can call up somebody or get on chat, online and just say, holy hell, did you see this or whatever? It makes life at least a little less lonely when you're working on things.
Yeah. That's true. I want to bring up Ronald Kelly specifically about isolation, because we did ask him about when he wrote for Zebra, and barely heard from readers. Sure. Didn't really have a super lot of communication with editors. Didn't get a choice in the cover art, which it makes sense for a bigger print, publisher. But yeah, I mean, it really just didn't sound like he had a whole lot. The dude wrote 8 or 10 thick fucking novels in like 6 or 7 years. And it feels like they're just kind of treated like slaves, man, where they're getting treated like shit.
Sadly.
So yeah, that I'm getting so off track, I guess, but that just made me think of how Ron talked about his days in the 90s working for Zebra. And I know for a fact he is just so much he prefers this era. And yeah, I like it too. I'm glad I don't have to pay for like ink or printer, ribbons of paper and printer paper or whatever. And I don't have to snail mail everything.
Me too. I'm really glad we're past that point.
The first novel, is that available, or is that kind of trunked?
Well, here's the thing. With that one, it's trunked for sure. We wrote this novel, and it was set in the Antarctic. And it dealt with an oil drilling crew that was down there. And there were some supernatural elements that got really ticked off that they were contaminating the earth and attacked the oil rig and, a whole bunch of other things. So I don't know if it was any good or not. I haven't even read this thing in years. But I know at the time when we were done, we got it, we edited it all, we polished it up to what we thought was the best. And she took care of it. She was in PR. She sent it out to the top 5. We got feedback. I don't remember exactly which publisher it was, but we got feedback because then you were sending the first 3 chapters. That's all they wanted to see.
Okay.
We got feedback, and they were handwritten red line notes. And on page 4, there was a line crossed through, and it said, "Your story starts here. I want you to rewrite this, polish things up, send it back to me for another look." Now, today, if I got that feedback from a top 5, I would be out in the yard doing a Snoopy dance. And then I would grab a case of Red Bull, and I'd be sitting down going, okay, I'm going to have this shit done by the end of the week. Back then, I had no idea how important that was. Not a clue. And the lady I wrote with, she didn't have a clue either. Her life went to hell in a handcart or something, and she kind of disappeared. She went off the radar. And so we never got around. But yeah, it's trunked. I still have it electronically somewhere, but it never. Yeah, I doubt that one will see the light of day.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Now looking back, I'm like, man, I could have had a published novel at 19. That would have kickstarted a whole bunch of things off then.
Yeah.
But we had started writing a second novel, and when she dropped off radar, I have that novel set aside. A couple of years ago, I ripped out all of the chapters that she wrote. I trashed them and put those aside, and I started rewriting it. And then I think I set it aside because I was working on The Compound for Thunderstorm Books. And I said, yeah, whatever. If I get back to that second novel and rework it, I'll get there at some point. I got other things I got to do ahead of that. But yeah, so we'll see. We'll see. It still might see the light of day. We'll see.
That's incredible. I've never heard that story from you. Brendan, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's, kind of a neat start to the whole collaboration thing, which is something you've explored, several times. Actually, I wanted to bring up one with Mr. Bowden. You and John Bowden are frequent collaborators, and you don't have to mail each other your work anymore. So tell us a little bit about the process, collaborating in general, but if you want to focus with John.
Sure. Like I say, it had been over 20 years since I collaborated the first time. And since that worked out so damn well, I stayed away from it and just focused on working on my own stuff. And John and I have been longtime friends, and he approached me one day after I was doing a reading. I think it was my novella, Ring of Fire. And it talks about some crazy backwoods characters and certain things. And John came up after the reading and said, I bet your family and my family could have a really great cookout together. And so we just started laughing a little bit. And he said, we should really think about writing something together. And I had been finishing up a couple projects. And I have an old scrapbook that I've kept probably now. It's probably 30 years old. But I used to cut out the strangest newspaper articles I could find and use them for idea generation. And I found a clip, I was flipping through it, and I found a clip about a pastor down south who was accused of trying to kill his wife with rattlesnakes because he was a snake handler in his church. And I think they actually turned it into a documentary like a year or two ago. And but I read this thing and I sent it to John. I took a photograph of it and I sent it to John. I said, I think we might be able to turn this into something if we kick it around. And we started working on Rattlesnake Kisses out of the gate. The end product, there's not a damn thing to do with that newspaper article whatsoever. But John and I, we come from very similar backgrounds. We can speak very fluent backwoods talk, and he and I just kind of meshed really well together, working together. And when we worked on Rattlesnake Kisses, we had the kernel of an idea. John wrote the first chapter and sent it to me, and I was floored by it. And I rolled up my sleeves and I said, "Okay, no, we're digging into this. Let's go." And we would write a chapter or two and send it back and forth to each other and just kind of go from there. But we didn't outline a damn thing. It was pantsing it the whole way. I mean, we were making it up on the fly, but it was just so much fun and so exciting to see what he was going to do next. And, there was sometimes he emailed me, I'd finished the chapter and text or call him. I'm like, "You rat bastard, I can't believe you did that," or whatever. He'd laugh and do the same thing to me. But we had so much fun developing this world, this town called Stillwater, that we continued with the second in the series called Cattywampus. We were originally going to call it, the first novel, Rattlesnake Kisses, we were originally going to call it Knuckle Bucket. And Knuckle Bucket was the nickname, was a slang term for a Southern gambling dice type of bar. It was a speakeasy type of thing.
Oh.
And so we as we worked on it and continued to work on it, it changed into Rattlesnake Kisses. And now we just set the whole series is called the Knuckle Bucket Tang series. So we're about, I'd say we're about 3 or 4 chapters away from finishing the 3rd book in the series called Black Salve. And they're all standalone novellas. That's the thing. They're all standalones. They're set in the same world, and that's their connection. But book number 3, I think that's floating around 56,000 words right now. So it's got a little heft to it. It's got some beef to it. But it's been such a blast working with John.
Yeah. You, John, Chad, and I'm forgetting who else was on, but that podcast that was on, was it Paper Cuts? God, I can't think.
Yeah, Paper Cuts, yeah.
I got young dad mush brain from my little guy keeping me up.
That's all right.
But yeah, that was a great conversation because, there's really nothing more enjoyable than be it a movie, a book, or a podcast or whatever, where you can feel the love between the people talking to each other. Like it's real.
Yeah.
And that's what you guys have.
Nah, they're such great dudes. I mean, Chad is such a talented guy. And, we had always kicked around the idea of working on a project together. And we had thrown around a couple ideas, and this opportunity came up for us to each write a single novella each and sort of thread them together a little bit. And so the opportunity came and we jumped on it. We jumped on that so fast. And I tell you, the trio of novellas, they should ship them with Kleenex to wipe people's eyes. They're going to break people in half. I have no doubt about it. But I still think that we are going to work on a project, truly work on a project together as sort of a round robin type of thing. And it's going to be a single piece of work.
Holy shit. 3 writers.
People have been itching for that for a while. So yeah, instead of it's going to be a 3-way collaboration. I still think we're going to pull that off. I think it's going to work. So I'm not going to tell you what the kernel of the idea is, but it's going to be a blast.
I mean, I want to read it already just because you guys are both 3. Sorry, 3. I just can't get that out. I can't believe you 3 are going to write a book together. You 3 are very good writers.
They're such good dudes.
Hey, Brennan, I think it's time that we dive into Burner because this book, for me, makes me want to ask you. We've talked about it off air, how we feel about Jack Ketchum, Bob. So, I don't think I flat out asked you, but maybe you told me. I can't remember. But was there influence from Ketchum in this? Because it really felt like he was riding shotgun with you during this ride.
Oh man, dude, there's the influence from Ketchum among almost everything that I write. I mean,
okay.
Dallas is one of the greats. You can't. He's always been an amazing guy. Both professionally and personally, he was amazing. But with Burner, that was another thing. That damn scrapbook I mentioned earlier. I think I was finishing up Rattlesnake Kisses with John, and it was one of those things you always have to, okay, what's next?
Yeah.
And I sat down and was flipping through this. I've reached a point now where I look through my idea notebook or whatever, and you kind of get a feel for whether this is a bigger concept for a novel or whether it's, just a short story or whether it's a little shorter, it's a novella. You kind of get a feel for where the concept gauges now. And I had read an article about a Japanese woman whose husband had a heart attack. And in the hospital, when she was there, he just said, "I'm sorry." And then he died. That was it. And she's like, what is that? But it wasn't like, "I'm sorry I didn't live longer. I'm sorry, whatever." She had no idea what he was apologizing for. And she came to realize he had been telling her that he was going to this job forever. No one knew who he was there. Whatever he was doing for his day job or paying the bills, this wasn't it. No one knew who he was. And I kept looking for a follow-up to this, and I couldn't find anything. And it was like a paragraph long article. It wasn't very long.
Wow.
But that setup really, really sunk into my skin. And it's one of those things that maybe not so much today because everyone has a cell phone. Mm-hmm. But years ago, a guy or a woman could walk out the door in the morning and come back home in the evening. And the truth is, they could tell you, I work for company X, but do you really know? Do you really know what they did their entire day? No, you don't care. It's just the end of the week. Are the bills paid? Is everything? Are we happy? That's it. No one, you don't know. So that idea just kicked around in my mind and collided with some other case studies that I had read that dealt with human trafficking, and those two things just collided right on the spot. And I started writing notes longhand, and I think I'd written about a dozen pages or so of longhand notes. And I was like, okay, clearly this is the one. This is what's next. All right. And the next day I dug into it. And it was like the process for writing Burn was like nothing else I've ever worked on. I usually write generally kind of slow, at least I used to. But I wrote the first draft of Burner in a month. I was angry at myself for stopping writing. and it was really unusual. There were times where I was typing fast enough that I felt like I couldn't catch up.
It's a thick book. That's why I'm holding it up.
It's a little light. I think it comes in about 70,000 words, I think. So it's slightly shy of a regular novel, but
Bob, 70,000 words in a month is a lot.
Well, I mean, it is for me too. But yeah, it was an unusual process, start to finish. It was.
I have heard the only thing that, and I believe it because of who said it, it was Scow that wrote, it might have been 50,000 in like a couple days. I can believe him doing something insane like that. But man, even 70,000 in a month, if that was my only job, I feel like my brain would feel like it was melting. How did you feel, like physically? How did you feel?
I felt like I had run a marathon at the end of the month.
I believe it.
Yeah. No, I when I got the first draft done, well, the original draft had probably another, I think about another 11 or 12,000 words in it. And I sliced it all out because even though it just didn't work by the time I was done. So I cut those out in the editing process. But yeah, at the end of that month, I felt like I got hit by a train. I was like, holy shit, I actually typed the end on this. Like, no, I felt like I was ready to collapse. And the first couple of days, I didn't know what to do with myself. I had been running on such high adrenaline, cranking this stuff out, that those first couple of days, I was like, now what the hell do I do? No, I just felt useless. Like I didn't know I had no purpose for the first couple of days. But it was just, like I say, it was such a weird process for me. And then just reviewing doing the research, you couldn't shake that off. There was a couple times I didn't feel like I could take enough showers to wash off the research that I had done, because it was some brutal stuff that I had read, from real life case studies and it was just brutal stuff.
We're diving, man.
Yeah. I think it's important to add, if, for any listeners who are avid readers, but maybe not necessarily writers, I think it's important to add that, there's no in my opinion, there's no hyperbole to what you're saying right now about feeling like you ran a marathon and feeling like you got hit by a truck. As a writer, like I've had that day where you get in 5,000 words. I've had that day, that month where you write, 50,000 words, never 70 or 90, but And it really is mentally exhausting. And it's one of those things you might not realize if you've never done it, but yeah, just kind of that effort of, you know, chugging that train along. And it certainly doesn't help that, you know, with such heavy material. And, you know, that I'm glad you talked about the research. I thought it was such a necessary afterword that you added to the book with the statistics that you found. And just knowing that, like, look, this isn't a story I'm telling flippantly. This is a real problem. And I, you know, to the best of my ability, I tried to approach it with care, but also with authenticity. And that's kind of what I want to throw at you, is how do you approach a topic like this with care, but also authenticity?
Well, for Burner, like I say, I knew the topic matter. I knew in order to do it proper justice, that it was going to have to be brutal, because, you know, real life human trafficking, real life sex trafficking at times is an incredibly brutal thing. A lot of the case studies that I had read, a lot of the documentaries that I'd watched, I had written certain scenes into Burner, into the first draft. I cut them out because they were so far over the top that it felt as if I was solely writing extreme horror for the purpose of writing extreme horror. And the most ridiculous part of it is it was real. It was based on real things. Those were the days where I was like, I can't take enough showers to get this out of my head right now. But I knew it was going to have to be written in a brutal manner. And I just really buckled down and did the research. I think there are a lot of things that I've written, but to do the homework properly first and let that rattle around in your head, I think that brings an authenticity and sincerity to what you're writing, especially a respect for something that I was doing. Absolutely, there are some horrific, terrible things that happened in Burner, but I just did the best I could to write them in my voice and you know, approach them with a respect because of the topic matter, because I didn't want to push it to the point of writing extreme horror. That's not something I was ever really interested in writing, is just extreme horror for the sake of grossing people out or having a gore fest or anything like that. That's never really been my thing. It's always been the character driven material, you know, the characters of the story. Oh, and by the way, she happens to be trafficked right now. You know, even with you know, The Compound, it was about the characters. It was about the mother and the father and the daughter primarily. Oh, and by the way, a zombie apocalypse is happening. It was always, you know, most everything that I've ever written has been really forcefully character driven, because that's what really interests me, is the people, the characters behind everything.
All right. So with that in mind, the whole characterization thing, actually, that kind of ties into the next thing I wanted to ask about. Now, I think one of the things that makes this novel something that is, you know, as hard as it was for you to walk away from writing it, it's equally hard to walk away from reading it. The pace is just breakneck. And I feel like a lot of that has to do with, call it the framing, if you will. So you know, we go between the two main characters, and it's a now chapter followed by two then chapters. And all I can think is a drum set playing a 3/4 rhythm. You got like bass, snare, snare, bass, snare, snare. And it's throughout the whole book, you know, I mean, it's hard to say you know exactly what's going to happen, because you absolutely don't. But like you're kept at this kind of this breakneck tempo throughout because of that. So how much of that was intentional, and could you speak a little bit to the now versus then framing?
Sure. I have always loved unique structure. You know, when I first saw Pulp Fiction, when you see Bruce Willis and his girlfriend get on the chopper, you know, I turned to my buddy in the theater, I'm like, that was a damn good movie, man. And I'm waiting for the credits to roll up. You know, and I see Bruce going, Zed's dead, baby, Zed's dead. And I'm like, all right, this is awesome. I would watch this again. And no, it's not done. Then it cuts to, it's still more. And I sat back down in the seat. I was like, that was supposed to be the end. Like, all right, I'm in now. Now you got my attention. Seeing things like that, watching movies like Memento, where the entire movie plays in reverse. I've always
or that Seinfeld episode.
Yeah,
the Indian.
exactly. But I've always loved and been drawn to things that have a very unique story structure. And season 1 of True Detective, 100% a massive inspiration for the structure of how Burner was constructed. And I loved, you mentioned the pace was very fast. I love very tight chapters because it forces the reader, as you guys probably figured out when you were reading it forces you, because you're like, damn it, what now? I need to know what happened next. And the then and now structure was something that I pulled in together versus the interviews for both women characters, because it was a good breather. The interviewing that was happened, present day, that was a breathing area, because everything else is such breakneck speed. The interviews were primarily dialogue with very, very little action. And it gave the reader, a couple pages at a time to take a breath and go, okay. But it also allowed me to fill in small details, small clues, small hints about what was to come. And it was just something that felt right for me to build it and structure this way. And I'm glad it worked out, because I wasn't really sure, to be honest. But no, that's something that gets mentioned an awful lot in the reviews. And so I'm glad it hit the mark with you guys. I am.
Well, and the structure almost reminded me a little bit of like when you have a book or even a short story that just has an opening line that grabs you, that sets up intrigue, and you read that first line, you're like, well, I got to find out what happens next. Yeah. Just that whole idea of like starting out with, here's where Iris is, here's where Iris was. Well, how the hell did we get to that?
Yeah. What happened in the middle of all this? Yeah. It felt. You mentioned a drum rhythm, and that is a really good analogy for it. Because I knew once I set that original structure for both Audrey and Iris, that became something, like you say, you're not sure what to expect from the plot line, from the story, but you know what to expect as far as the structure. And I felt that was a good slot, because now you know what's coming next as far as timeline and then and now and everything in between. So, but yeah, no, I'm glad that was something that stuck out to you, man, really.
And also, I don't think we covered Iris and Audrey, the connection. We're not going to say what it is, but like, I remember at one point, I think it was 25% in, and I was like, David Ford, I think I understand what Burner is. I didn't. I mean, I did to some extent, but like, not really. It's really interesting. It felt like there's a lot of, my wife doesn't like horror, but she likes true crime. And I will argue this to death, but that is a subgenre of horror. And I mean, it could be pretty fucked up, true crime. And
yeah, big time.
The way my favorite ones, they do what you did. They do the reenactment, and it can get crazy or whatever, and it jumps to the dialogue, and it pressurizes the situation. And when you finally hit that point right before everything explodes, like, I'm pretty sure I said, holy shit. And then I read what happens between the two. And the saddest part of all of it is I could see someone doing, I'm trying to think of how to word this without ruining the spoiling it, but I could see someone doing what one of the characters did in order to make the other character have a bad time. I guess that's the best way to put it.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. And I sort of knew, well, the original ending was completely scrapped. That 10, 11,000 words I mentioned, that was all cut out. That was my original ending. So I destroyed all that.
Okay.
But I reached a point where I kind of wasn't sure about the in between. So when the characters, from where they were in the very beginning to the middle to the end, it definitely, there is sort of a strange arcing situation that happens with their characters, from a high and a low in their personality. Sure. And it really puts certain readers into a gray area where they may get angry or they may sympathize. And I've had readers tell me that and message me or tell me directly, saying, damn you, you really pushed me into this gray area where I didn't know how to feel about this anymore. And I was like, well, good luck with that. And, in the middle of my mind, I'm like, hot damn, that's exactly what I wanted to do, is to push you. And again, I mentioned earlier, I think that's what art is supposed to do. It's supposed to be thought-provoking. It's supposed to do that kind of thing. Yeah. So I'm glad I hit the mark with this one.
And that's what people are. They're not all good and all, and we can like, I can even admit this. I can really dislike this one person. It can all be valid, but there's still good qualities about that person.
Yeah. Oh yeah, most definitely.
And when you kind of did what George R.R. Martin did with Game of Thrones, you think you hate this one character, but then you're like, I'm starting to like them, or I'm starting to feel bad for them. So seriously, man, I think it deserves to be on the same shelf as Ketchum's Girl Next Door. It really just executes it that well.
That's kind words, pal. I appreciate that.
Yeah, man.
No, it was quite something to work on, but I was honestly, I was glad to finish the edits and move on. I was ready to move on to something lighter.
I brought something like that up about Ketchum when we had the Extreme Horror panel, and I kind of never thought about it until we were talking, and I'm like, I bet it, from what I hear, Dallas was a super sweet guy, and I bet that was all writers, man. We're driven. We have to write that story. So I bet that really was just kind of like a huge boulder that was lifted off his shoulders, like Burner was with you.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It, like I say, I turned attention to something. I still feel it's probably the scariest novel that I've written. But yeah, I had to turn attention from something that was a little too close to real life with Burner. So yeah, I'm still waiting. I've got the novel Dead Pennies. It's out waiting with I'm not going to say who with right now, but it's been waiting a bit.
Dead Pennies.
Yeah, Dead Pennies is a term. I had a part-time job years ago, and a guy that was one of my coworkers, we were talking one day, and he realized I wrote horror, and he said, "You got a blog?" And I said, this was early on. I said, "Yeah, I'm kicking one around right now." He's like, "You should name it something cool like Dead Pennies." And I was like, "What does that mean? Why did you say that? What does that even mean?" He's like, "I don't know. It sounds cool." And then he just kind of wandered off. And I'm like, all right. I'm like, well, it does sound cool, but it's stuck in my mind. It didn't mean anything for my blog, but it's stuck in my mind. And so when I was wrapping up the edits on Burner, I was switching gears, and this damn phrase "dead pennies" came back to me. And when when you're a kid, I don't know if you guys did it, but some kids they'll run out and they'll put a penny on a railroad track.
Oh yeah, to flatten it.
Flattens it, it or whatever. Or you'll sometimes get change and a penny will be twisted or bent or chipped or whatever. Well, eventually, when they become damaged too much, in this novel of mine, my theory was the U.S. Mint or the Treasury Department basically goes, nah, that's unfit for human circulation. We're yanking it. And they refer to them as dead pennies. Now, that idea combined with an old hospital set years ago where orphaned, deformed, mentally challenged children were sent and abandoned, because they were ashamed. That was a shame to have these kids in society. And the nickname that the hospital staff gave them was Dead Pennies.
Jesus Christ, Bob.
They were unfit for human circulation.
Oh my God, it sounds so fucked up, but I want it in my brain now. That sounds horrible.
Yeah, one way or the other, you guys will be reading this one in the next year, one way or another.
Excellent.
But yeah, that one, there were moments where I truly creeped my own shit out. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to step away from the laptop. I'm glad it's the light of day for a minute. But yeah, that was by far the scariest thing that I've ever written. But it was fun because, again, it was much lighter than Burner. Mentally, it was much lighter than Burner for me to work.
Really? It doesn't sound good.
Yeah. Well, at least it wasn't dealing with human trafficking. I mean, it wasn't, Burner I could read about on the news tomorrow and be like, yeah, okay.
That's true. I live right, as you both know, I live right near Atlantic City. So sure. I know at one point that was like the highest sexually trafficked city.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Yeah, and being so close to Philadelphia, it's a strange corridor, of trafficking. But nah, Dead Pennies was just such a blast to work on. But I had a lot of fun just creeping myself out with certain things. So
with who?
Yeah, hopefully,
who'd you write it with?
Huh?
Who'd you write it with?
Oh, just me. That's my own novel. Yeah.
Okay, I thought.
Yeah, no, I just had a lot of fun just writing, coming up with ideas and creeping myself out. It was a blast.
I thought that was the one where you're like, I'm not going to say who I co-wrote this with, and I tried tricking you.
Oh, no. It's set with a publisher right now, so I'm not gonna mention the publisher's name, but I
definitely don't.
Yeah, I'll hear some good news soon. Yeah,
Brennan, off to you, sir.
I want to throw one more thing out there about Burner before we move on, and I'm retreading ground a little bit, but it reminded me of an experience I had reading Samantha Koyasnik's True Crime, where you get to a point where some of the choices, and I feel like, to me, I don't know if this was your intention, but to me, the choices made under pressure was a constant theme throughout that book. It's certainly something that grabs the attention, and you almost as a reader have to come to terms at some point with the fact that you might not be able to sympathize with a character's decision because you can't you're physically unable to put yourself in the position that they're in. There's a couple good examples, but I think the first strongest one to me came, I'd say probably around 70% of the way through the book. I wish I had like a page number or something to give you, but Bob, I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And it was just that's an unbelievable decision. I can't understand that. I can't come to terms with that. And I'm also in a privileged position in my life where I will never have to. I hope, God.
Right. I hope not.
Shit, I just jinxed myself.
I hope not.
What does his wife really do for a living?
she stays at home. What does she do? I'm making a living.
So you think?
Yeah, that's true. My kids are tattletales. They tell on her. But no, I guess there's no question there. But I feel like the only way that works, where the reader can look at those and almost kind of take themselves out of the scenario because it is so gray, is because the setup is done in such a way that you truly understand, just how dire these circumstances are. And, bravo to you for setting the stage there.
Yeah. Sure. And that very pivotal moment that you're referring to, like you say, there was a lot of setup, a lot of build up, and it had all been building to that specific moment and event. And but yeah, no, I think you know, it was a difficult thing to put myself in their mindset, to figure out what I would do in that situation, you know. But you got to push past that. I just kept pushing myself as a writer and thinking, how can I possibly make this even worse of a situation? And that's where it led me, pal. So, I mean, yeah, so that was the situation that it took me to. Yeah.
So we can go into as much detail or little detail as you want, but you have written a one romance, like strictly romance.
I have. Yeah. Go ahead. What was your question?
I just wanted, because I like don't hear that very often. I know Richard Lehman did that too, but he used a pseudonym. I don't think you did.
No, in retrospect, I should have.
So
I may re-release it under a pseudonym. It probably would sell better. You know, the thing is, the reviews I've gotten are all stellar.
Oh,
but,
okay.
Yeah, I may re-release it under a pseudonym on purpose. I may do that soon.
Yeah. So, well, do a different cover, man.
Yeah, I'll change the cover.
Tell us how that even came about.
I tend to get my titles first, almost all the time. And then my subconscious rattles around and figures out what does that mean? You know, what the hell storyline is this? I had the title Free Ride Angie in my mind for about 3 or 4 years before that finally came to fruition. You know, it's things like that happen all the time. Samson in Denial is another one. I knew he was a pawn shop owner. That's it. That's all I had, you know, whatever. But No Lipstick in Avalon was just this title. I used to have my ad agency in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And occasionally I would do business lunches, and there was a bartender that I knew named Molly. And she told me about growing up and summering in Avalon, New Jersey. And it just sounds cool. Avalon, you know, I've never been there. Avalon sounds magical. It might be a complete dump. I have no idea. But to me, it sounded like the freaking Magic Kingdom. And it's stuck in my mind. And No Lipstick in Avalon just came to me. The title came to me one day, and I jotted it down. And the first chapter I wrote, it just was sort of a stream of consciousness type of thing. And the whole book is sort of that style. It's a very stream of consciousness sort of approach to things. But I wrote the first chapter and I set it aside, and I didn't touch it for probably another 7 or 8 years. Just one of those things.
Wow.
And it was just one of those things. One day the voice woke up, and again, strong female lead character in that. And it was just ready. And it was one of those things. I think I wrote that in 2 months, 2 or 3 months, I think. And It just went from there. But no, the reviews are stellar. People love it. I get asked a lot, are you ever going to do a follow-up? And here's the thing. I have an outline, a loose outline, called The Sand Priest of Dewey Beach. And it's about a guy, you know, a young couple in Dewey Beach, Delaware, that, you know, and I don't know. So no, I have notes, but I'm like, yeah, I'll get there. I'll get to that eventually. But no, I've been thinking about re-releasing, you know, No Lipstick in its own format with a pseudonym. Yeah, I'll update the cover though, most certainly.
Is that a real beach?
Dewey Beach?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Where's that? Yeah. Is that near Lewis or Rehoboth?
Yeah, I think it's down in that whole region down there. Yeah.
Because that's like the only part of Delaware that I'm familiar with.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's right kind of along those lines. Yeah, right in that area.
Oh, okay. Brennan, you want to go? You want to jump in with something else?
Yeah. All right. So I want to talk about doing readings. Because you ask anybody who goes to a con, you know, who does the best readings, and name Bob Ford pops up an awful lot. So
yeah,
for newer authors, especially, let's gear this to newer authors who have never done a reading before and What do they have to concentrate on? What do they need to know to do something memorable and not put the crowd to sleep?
You hit me at a good time because I just gave a how to do a live reading workshop at that time. I think that it's so many, new readers. If you've never done a live reading before, they get really, really nervous. And, there was a survey done years ago. More people are afraid of dying, or no, more people are afraid of doing live readings than they are of death, which is ridiculous.
Wow.
If you're doing, a live reading and it's from your own work, it's really, the first thing is about approach. I mean, it's a gift. Don't think about what you're taking away from the audience. Think about what you're giving the audience. They're there to see you. They're there to hear what you have written, and it's your opportunity to hold them captive for 15, 20 minutes. And don't read the story. Perform the story. I never, ever, ever sit in a chair or stand behind a podium and give my readings. Ever. When I'm giving my readings, I step out from behind the podium and I work the room. I'm delivering the story. I'm performing the story. And it really helps sort of especially if you're nervous, it helps you detach a little bit from that. Clearly, you have to practice your ass off, know your material before you get there. And first person point of view stories are the most intimate thing you can read. Because when you're reading first person, you can just become the character. That's it. That's the easiest thing. You're not reading a story. You're just sitting down with a group of people around a campfire and you're telling the story. And that's what makes it so, so much easier, Now, not every time, there's going to be times, of course, where you're going to have to read third person because that's, mainly what, most things are written in. For third person, I would really say, focus on varying the voice. If you're reading backstory and narration, lower your voice slightly. If you're reading dialogue, don't be afraid to use voices. I use voices, character voices all the time. Patrick, how often do you read bedtime stories?
I do it pretty damn often, man.
Exactly.
I do silly voices though. If I did that for a horror movie, no one's got to take me serious, Bob.
I don't know. You might have the best damn reading ever if you do silly voices. But Brennan, the same thing. You said you had children. How often you read? You just got to have fun with it. Don't be afraid to use voices.
That's a good.
That's a really good way. I slip into accents all the time. When I did live readings of Blood Roses, I sound like I walked in off the range, man. I mean, I was reading it and then doing the characters and doing the thing. But just have fun with it. Don't be so uptight and just relax and have fun with it. But just realize you're there giving the audience a gift. Don't focus about, if I read this, they're going to buy my book. I'm promoting. Yeah, you are. But don't focus on that. Focus, you are giving the audience a gift of hearing what you're providing them right that day. You're giving them a taste of who you are as an author and what your talent is and your skill set is. Just focus on that. It'll all come back.
I think one of my big takeaways there, and there's a lot of good stuff in there. You should teach a workshop on that. Good answer. Is just the extremely obvious fact of the audience is that they want to like it. You're not fighting with them. They want to enjoy the reading.
Right.
It's like being a stand-up comedian. That people go because they want to laugh.
Yeah.
They go because they want to hear a good story. And it's not your job to cram it down their throat. It's your job to perform it. Yeah. Again, brilliant in its simplicity. Patrick, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
So I've heard Bob talk about some of this stuff, but I think it's really good pointers, because I've never done a lot of reading, and I have no problem talking to an audience, but I don't know what the fuck the mechanics are. So like it's advice like that. Before we start recording, when we were recording, I think you said that there's some good tips in the show. I can't remember if it was when we were recording. So if we weren't, you mentioned that. And this is one of those really good suggestions, and it's timeless, because unless people stop wanting to be entertained, you got to perform it. And that's really smart, because it's kind of like theater.
Yeah.
Because if you read it, and this is obvious, but if you read it all monotone, who the hell is going to pay attention?
It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
Not a 2-year-old, that's for sure.
No. And that's the thing. I mean, literally the last, the first time that most of us have been read to, it was to put us to sleep.
That's hilarious. I've never thought of that. Yeah.
So, and I've seen some really phenomenal writers that don't know how to read well. And
list them. No, I'm kidding.
And it's unfortunate, because it doesn't matter how great the work is. If you're there to hear a live reading, and like you say, you read it monotone and they don't do anything to shake it up. Yeah, I've seen audience members drift off, and it's not their fault. I've seen them do the head shake, snap, eyes back thing and whatever, and it's not their fault. It's this is what they're listening to that moment.
All right, Bob. So in your experience, what's if you're planning a reading and you don't necessarily have parameters, what's an optimum time to make your reading last?
Right. Usually, I usually try to target mine about the 20-minute mark. That's usually a sweet spot for me, and that's whether I'm reading an excerpt of a novel or a short story. That's about the sweet spot for me. And I practice it ahead of time, definitely time myself, so I know where I fall. Because, traditionally cons used to be, you would share an hour slot. And they would have 5 minutes for Q&A or something like that. Now it's kind of cut back to 2 per 45 minutes. So you got to hustle. You kind of get through the work pretty quick. But yeah, for me, I try to pick it around the 20-minute slot and practice it. I practice it. I know where I can use a pause for emphasis when I'm reading it, and pick out lines that really have an emotional punch. A short story of mine, Georgie, is a very emotional, brutal story. And I know exactly in that story where to deliver certain lines to the audience that's going to hit. And I pick them out ahead of time. Before I even start the reading, I pick out people in the audience. I'm like, I'm going to hit you, and I'm going to nail you with that line. I already know, what's going to happen when I'm delivering. So, but yeah, about 20 minutes is the short answer to that. That's my sweet spot for the timing.
Yeah. And again, because we said, hey, give some advice to newer people who've never done a reading. And I would imagine that 20 minutes sounds like an eternity, but I bet it flies.
Oh yeah, it does when you're having fun, And if you're not such a confident reader, and it's your first reading or whatever, then cut it back a little bit. Shoot down for 15 minutes, because that way, and you're going to gain confidence. Like with anything else, the more you do it, you just got to get through that first one. You just got to get through that one. Then you're good to go. You'll be a lot better the more you do it.
So this is already out publicly about the Western anthology. And I would like, if you are okay with it, I'd like to know for Blood Rose, something, because I wrote a short story, a Western, and for me, the research, I was writing about this isolated family of 2 in Montana, and I don't know anything about Montana, so I had to do a lot of research with that, the late 1800s, and it was fun, but I'm wondering what your process was like, and if you want to tell a synopsis of what Blood Rose is about.
Sure. Well, the process for Blood Roses for me, I started digging, much like you did, even before I had a concept. I started digging into the vernacular of the Old West.
Okay.
Old sayings, old phrases, pushing up snakes. That meant you're dead. You're underground, you're pushing up snakes. Certain phrases like that. And I came across the phrase that was actually the original title for that, called soiled doves. And soiled doves were prostitutes.
I get it. I get it.
Now it makes perfect sense, right?
Yeah. Oh my God. That's raunchy.
But I loved that phrase. I thought, man, that's really freaking cool. I love that phrase. So I started learning the vernacular and the vocabulary at the time. I started looking into the weaponry because, again, if you do that homework and that research ahead of time, it just feels authentic. Then it just feels right. And my own backwoods way of speaking with Bowden at times, that certainly came into play. I probably cheated a little bit. It may not be 100% authentic, but it definitely works. And just did the homework like that ahead of time. So I kind of knew and had an index file ready to know, okay, this was a Yellow Boy rifle. This was the pistols that they used. I remember looking up whiskey to know if whiskey was used, existed. That certain type of brand of whiskey existed back then. Just certain things like that. And then digging into the type of names of characters, to what would be a fitting name. Did this name exist? Did it not exist? And there were certain things that I found. I forget, there was one specific phrase that I used, but when I went back, I'm like, I got to double check this. The phrase itself didn't exist, at the time. It was a weird cliche metaphor type of phrase. It didn't exist until about 50 years later, and it came over from Europe. I'm like, all right, got to scrap that, but it's things like that. But when I got past that homework and just dug into the idea of soiled doves, I knew I wanted it to be a Western, but I knew I wanted supernatural elements into it. And the synopsis was a brothel owner, a brothel owner lady. She comes over to the sheriff's office, and because someone has found two of her girls dead, and they brought them back, but they're not only dead, they've been messed with. There's rope burns around their ankles and the wrists.
Oh God. Yep.
So they're in bad shape. And it just kind of spiraled from there. Again, this was one of those novellas. I didn't really outline it. I just said, this feels good. This idea feels right. And just kept writing and working on it. And it hit the word count that I was after. I mean, I think it came in around 25,000 words, almost on the dot.
Wow.
And it just felt right for what it was going. But even in this, I surprised myself a couple of times because I wasn't outlining. And I love when that shit happens, because when a character does something unexpected, I'm like, well, if it surprised me, I'm pretty sure it's going to surprise the reader when this happens. So yeah, I'm going to roll with this and make it work. So, but it was a blast. I grew up watching Clint Eastwood and, all the old spaghetti Westerns. And, it was just, I had so much fun watching Westerns when I was growing up. I have no idea why I never decided to try my hand at writing a Western before this, but it won't be my last. It won't be my last by a long shot.
Good. I love the cover though too. Seriously, look at that. For audio listeners, you have to watch the YouTube version. That's beautiful. That's absolutely
cover is just such beautiful artwork.
Yeah. Speaking of like getting the right weapon and whatnot, I had this one scene in my short, and it was an ice shack, and I was like, okay, well, did they exist back then? And what kind of blade did they use to cut into the ice? And it's a lot of weird shit you don't think about until then. When we had Jeremy Hepler on earlier this week, he was talking about how him and Kenneth Kane were going back and forth on just is this accurate to that timeline? And it was Kenneth Kane goes, there wasn't indoor plumbing in this part during the, like, I think it was the early 1900s, this place in Texas. And Jeremy's like, I'm from here, and no, there was no indoor plumbing until like the 1940s.
Right.
It's bizarre. It's really bizarre. Brennan, do you have any thoughts on that? Because you too have written a few westerns.
Yeah, and it's, you know, you hope you luck out and that people will write it off to, you know, well, it's fiction, so it doesn't have to be perfect, but you know somebody's reading it with a fine-tooth comb, just waiting to catch you if you make a mistake.
I gotcha. That's
no, and I think, you know, Bob, you mentioned, I don't know why I haven't done this before, because it's a blast. And what I had the most fun with, and I've got a novella coming out, I don't know when, but soonish. So I can't announce the publisher yet, but maybe it'll be out by the time this episode airs. Right. But I found the dialogue to be the most fun to write, and but that's also where I'd sometimes get myself in trouble and have to, you know, go through like an internet deep dive of, you know, etymology. Pat was one of my early readers, and I remember he called me out on because I had some character use the word goofy, and apparently that was not a widely used term until right before the Disney character came into play. So now I know that. Now I'm a little more learned in that regard. But oh man, they're fun as hell to write.
No, in the dialogue, you know, I realized, because I had a, you know, like I said, I had an index file of these are cool phrases that I really liked, you know, but I realized some of them, even though I liked them, there wasn't enough context in what I was writing the dialogue in at the time to make it work. So I had to strip it out and kind of rework it a little bit. And you know, and occasionally I do this in my darker sort of crime fiction as well. I'll make up terms that don't exist, you know, and as long as you use it in a way that makes sense to the reader, this is a believable term now.
Back ass words.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's one of those things, you know, I'm racking my head. I've been thinking about examples of this, but you know, to create a new terminology for, you know, say for example, for a drug mule or something, you know, if you can create a new term for that and it makes sense in the context, suddenly in the reader's eye, that's a believable term. Of course. Well, of course, that's what they call a drug mule. You know, of course, why not? You know, so in the Old West, when it's further from our actual, you know, everyday knowledge, I would say you can make up a bunch of terms, and as long as it's used in context, no one's going to know the difference because it's believable then.
Yeah. Or even like, you know, using in dialogue, like analogies or similes. You know, I always love when I get feedback on like throwing a simile in there, and somebody will be like, "Oh, that's good. Where'd you hear that?" It's like, "Oh, I made that up. That's not something they said back then." It's like, nope. All me. But again, if you present it properly in context, you can absolutely get away with that. Hence fiction, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, at the end of the day, you could just say, hey, it's a fucking book. Did you like it?
Did you like the story? Okay, shut up.
No, I've got others.
Well, this can go in so many directions, but from the time you started writing, we've covered this in one form, but from the time you started writing to now, are there any things notable, good or bad or both, that you've really noticed have changed from both time periods?
Yeah, Amazon is both a curse and a blessing.
Yeah.
You know, there are so many books that get published through Amazon, and unfortunately a lot of those books have terrible covers. They haven't gone through really good editing process, and you know, but they're published, and unfortunately they're right beside books that have gone through exactly that process of having a good cover design, having an editing process, taking the time and the care and the effort to make it as polished as possible. And they're on the same shelf as far as Amazon is concerned.
It's insane.
So the competition to do that is so incredibly intense. You know, on one side, if you have a decent fan base, sure, you know, you can put a book out tomorrow. And if you have that fan base in place, they all know where to find you. And that book's right there. It's easy. Click a button and, you know, do your process, your due diligence, but, you know, click a button and it's there. It's available in 48 hours. But you are competing with so many different things. I used to see, you know, and there still are a tremendous amount of small press that really do their homework. They treat their writers really well. They have their statements on time and it's good things. But then there are so many other small press publishers I've seen in the past that just couldn't pull through. And it was a damn shame to watch that happen. You know, the horror boom of the 80s was enormous. I mean, it was out of control how many horror novels were getting published. And of course, you know, anything that rises that high is going to come with a terrible, terrible crash. So I don't know. There's good and bad, but I think it's like anything else. I think it just runs in cycles, you know. So I just do the best I can to focus on the good stuff and just keep my nose to the grindstone and keep writing away and just keep focused on the positive stuff. The negative stuff, it's never going to hang around anyway, so it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Did I lose your audio?
Nope. I muted myself and realized after I started talking. I was making a dumbass joke saying that's true. I work at a wastewater treatment plant and solids, you know, sludge eventually, you know, sinks to the bottom. So
it was nice of your mic to mute you.
Yeah, it knew what it was doing. It's smarter than me. Brennan, I feel like you had something else and I don't want to cut you off.
I was just thinking that whole Amazon is a blessing and a curse is, I mean, that's a whole episode in and of itself. And you know, the obvious question is, so where do we go with that? What do you do about that? But there's no obvious answer to the obvious question. You know, do you put in place safeguards? And at that point, you know, then are you really still, you know, open to a variety of, you know, people able to self-publish? The dreaded gatekeeping term gets thrown out there. Yeah. And, you know, of course, like any mega corporation, they're going to take advantage of, you know, they're going to take a whole lot more royalties off your book than they really should. I mean, the only ideal solution would be a platform designed with the author in mind to, you know, help with the editing process, to, you know, give assistance in the cover design process, and to not, you know, rake the pennies out of every little ebook sale you make. So yeah, no, there's no question there. Sorry, thought I could scrape something, but
nope, you were just cementing the point, man. That's all.
I was talking in circles until I came up with something and I hit the bottom of the well.
Well, now you know it's like. So, Brennan, do you want to jump to what are you reading?
Yeah, sure. Now you know what it's like. 150 episodes, but you finally pulled a McDonough.
I really don't like how everyone
I apologize for my foibles.
Uses that as a verb for bad things. Bob, what are you currently reading?
Let's see. The last thing I read was an as yet unpublished, unedited short story from John Bowden. Read that yesterday, and that guy just knocks everything out of the damn park. And then aside from that, I have a copy of Drag You Down by Nathan McCall. And I'm telling you what, he's really impressing the shit out of me.
Yeah.
He's a cool dude. Yeah, I just met him at the AuthorCon a couple weeks ago. He's a cool dude. He's a great dude. But yeah, I'm really impressed with that. But it's rare for me to be able to read much of anything unless I'm editing it. It's been a bit. It's been a hot minute for that.
Because you tell me when I ask about it, you say you're doing like 16-hour days sometimes, and I just don't understand that.
Sometimes, yeah, it's switching. It's switching from my own stuff to working with John Bowden currently, or editing for John. And then the novella, the project that Chad, he and I just finished, I was working my ass off on that and editing that down. So yeah, it was pretty crazy there for a little while, but now I can breathe a little bit.
I'm glad. You gotta chill before you burn out, man. Burner.
Yeah. No, I got up about 4 or 5 chapters into a new novel, and this one I have to force myself to slow down on it.
Really?
This one has a big feel to it, like Burner. So, but this one I'm forcing myself to slow down on this one a little bit. I don't want to go through this one in a month rush. I'm forcing myself on this one, but so yeah. But now it's it's like I say, it's safest just to keep your head down and keep busy. Just keep cranking.
Mallory did that with the Cape and Ghoul, 500 words a day.
Yeah.
Because you said it felt so big days. That's a slow and steady approach.
Yep.
Brendan, what are you currently reading?
Can't win a marathon and an all-out sprint. Couple things. So we have Mr. Tyler Jones coming on next week. So I am about to start. I can't tell you what it's about because I have not started it yet, but this is the only book of his that I have not read yet. And I have loved Criterium, Almost Ruth, and I burned through his collection. Burn the Plans, did not do that on purpose. It's fantastic. I mean, it's Michael Marshall Smith wrote the introduction. He says, this is, not being paid to do this, but this is one of the best short story collections I've read. And it's every story fires on all cylinders. So I'll promote that instead of the book that I just held up. I am also partway through, and I do not know how to say this author's name, but Echo by Thomas Old, I'm going to say Huvelt. I believe he's a Danish author. And that's a Tor Nightfire book. And it's good so far. It's jumping through like a lot of different, almost epistolary, where it'll go through journals and then it'll go through like a more traditional third person narrative. And the voices are, there'll be some places where it reads like a ghost story, some places where it reads almost like something like Chuck Palahniuk would write, some places where you're just no idea what's going on. But it's kind of about a haunted mountain, if that piques your interest. Okay. And the one I'm just diving through right now is Don Winslow's City on Fire, coming out in a couple of days, actually. And I just picked this up yesterday, and I'm already like 150 pages through it. It takes place right around Providence, so like right down the street from me. And he does maybe 25 pages of building scenery and atmosphere and accents in as much as you can build accents through dialogue. And then the story just like rip roars into action. And like I usually have like 5 or 6 books going at once, and I haven't seen those other ones in 2 days because that's all I want to go with.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Patrick, how about you, sir?
Yeah, I'm just starting this. Tyler Jones is Almost Ruth. So I can't tell you what it's about because I haven't read it yet. I just finished Patrick C. Harrison and Daniel Volpe. I don't even know still if that's how you say his last name, but
Volpe.
Yeah, that was a joke.
No, that's not right.
No, I don't think it is. I don't think he's French. But they are coming out with a collection, and it's splatterpunk, and it's an excellent read, but I could not eat and read that shit at the same time. It's just so fucked up what they wrote about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's all I got right now. Bob, where can people follow you?
Don't follow me on Twitter. I hate that app. You can follow me, if you go to robertfordauthor.com, That's where you can find my most recent updates and things like that. I don't even remember my handle on Instagram. I'm more on there a lot because that seems to be a much more friendly environment for me. But yeah, and you know, like anything else, everything on the planet is on Amazon. So yeah. But robertfordauthors.com is the best place to find me.
Excellent. And do you have any final thoughts?
No, just appreciate, I had a blast tonight. I appreciate you guys having me on the show. I'd be happy to come and talk to you guys, on air, off air, anytime. Had a great time.
I'm going to jump in, and Brennan, you'll get the last say, sir. Yeah, Bob, I love talking to you, and I'm glad that we finally could do this. And I hope more people read Burner. Oh man, I forgot to ask you about that story you told me about how it got a jump. Do you want to talk about that real quick? Where it got a jump, and you talked to the person that gave you that jump in sales from Burner?
Oh yeah. There was
that was just it. Sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say it's kind of like a reminder for people that are readers and not writers to kind of it does matter.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I was I guess over the past month and a half, I had noticed a really big spike in sales for Burner. And I'm looking around the internet I'm looking on Goodreads, I'm looking on Amazon. I'm like, I don't see any, and there's more reviews, like a half a dozen new reviews came in, and then there was 10 and 12. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? And I can't find anything anywhere. I don't know what's going on. So I'm down at the AuthorCon, and a fan comes up who I'd never met. And we're talking, and she's telling me how much she loves Burner. And I was like, well, that's really cool. I appreciate your kind words. I guess that's great. I said, I was like, it's gone through this weird spike in sales the last month. And she's like, that might have been me. And I was like, why? What did you do? And she posted on Facebook in a group called Books of Horror. And that was 100% it. That was the spike in sales. So yeah, like any especially any writer who's not, a household name yet, any fan who ever posts a review, or posts anything like that, or shares a book and talks about it, it is absolutely, utterly important and completely, it does make a difference. And trust me when I say every author is incredibly thankful for anybody who does that kind of thing. But yeah, it was a very cool thing that she did, and truly appreciate it.
That's awesome. Thanks for telling that story again, Bob.
Yeah, sure, man.
Brennan, any final thoughts, sir?
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. I would say odds are, if you're posting, whether it's a positive experience reading a book, or even just, I got this in the mail, look how cool the cover looks.
Yeah.
Every post like that is gonna get new eyes on that author, on that, on that cover, on that book. And, even if it's just one potential sale, I'll take 1 over 0 every time. Yeah, no, Bob, I want to echo what Pat said. I want to thank you for your time. We appreciate you spending Friday night with us. And it's been a blast, man. We'd love to have you back anytime.
Kick ass. It's been a blast for me too, guys.
Yeah. Listeners, next episode 146 is with the author of Almost Ruth and Criterion, Tyler Jones. That's gonna be that guy's a junior Polnick, and I mean that in the nicest of ways. Like, I feel like he just says stuff that I'm not smart enough to follow sometimes, and he's super nice. So totally not taking a shot at him, but looking forward to that. Listeners, as always, you have many choices in podcasts. Thank you for picking us.